What I think will be of eventual interest and importance will be applications, putting all of this research, all of these things into applications. And over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working mainly in applications. I also teach, I also do research, and I also write. So, but applications, I think, are the future of remote viewing. I would like to put up a view graph here to, some of you may have seen this before, but I'd like you to start off by looking at this view graph and thinking about it, and at the end I'm going to explain it. It says, does this drawing scare you? No. Why should I be scared by a hat? Yes. What a dangerous thing. So at the end of my talk, I'm going to explain what this is. This was one of Saint-Exupéry's drawings from his book, The Little Prince. The next slide, next view graph. What I'm going to talk about today is how feedback can sometimes come very late after a remote viewing. Sometimes it'll take several years. On July 28, 1992, I took part in an operational remote viewing session that was carried out by one of at least 8 viewers. I never knew the exact total, on a coordinate-driven session. The viewers had a track record of proven remote viewing skill. No upfront information or feedback was given by the tasker to the viewers, and the viewers were kept incognito. That is, that none of us knew who else had the target, or in fact who the other viewers were. I had no idea who the other viewers were at the time that I did this viewing. The viewers utilized several protocols: TRV, CRV, ERV. ARV was not involved in this. You'll hear more about ARV at this conference. Feedback was given by the tasker a few days later to at least one viewer, myself, in the form of a newspaper clipping of a story involving a plane crash and disappearance of a Lightning P-38 during World War II on July 31st, 1944. The pilot of the plane was Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and he was the author of a famous children's book called The Little Prince, as well as many other writings. He was a prolific writer. Further feedback was given to the viewers in August of 1992 in the form of a final report. There seemed to be a great deal of concordance between the viewer sessions, but no further feedback was available at that time. Now, this final report had its good points and bad points. The good point was it showed the concordance between the viewers' perceptions. The bad thing about it was that it didn't show all of the data, all of the viewers' data. It was selective data, but it was actual data from at least 8 viewers. In November 1998, 6 years after the fact, an article in Paris Match, a French magazine, indicated that a trawler fisherman had found the location of the downed aircraft off the coast of the Côte d'Azur in the south of France. An inscribed bracelet was found at the site. It was dredged up by a fisherman and confirmed the plane as the one crashed by Saint-Exupéry. A request for further information from the French authorities provided a great deal of feedback regarding the locale and landmarks in the area of the crash site. This feedback was presented to 2 of the viewers last year, and I would have had 3 individual remote viewing sessions, but actually I have 2, and relevant feedback is going to be presented today, as well as information about the life and writings of Saint-Exupéry. Next view graph. This is from the final report. You will note that this viewer pointed out that the plane landed in ocean water. There were white cliffs, promontory headlands, estuary, and currents. If we can go to the next, I'll just say next, and you'll know. This is the viewer number 1 sketch. You can see the white cliffs. and there's a foghorn somewhere, white, rocky estuary. You can see the river there, the bluff, promontory, headlands, approximate position of wreckage. Next. Viewer number 2, again, he said near a river delta, and that the wreckage had moved slowly over time. Next. Viewer number 2, sketch. So remember these because you're going to be seeing some feedback later. The next is another sketch from viewer number 2. The debris has moved and it's in the delta. Next. Viewer number 3 said high white sea cliffs, man-made structures atop the cliff. And next, the sketch from viewer 3. You can perhaps show that one way and then tilt it so they can see the other. Okay. We don't have feedback from viewer 4, but we have next viewer 5, who said there was a tall, round, white structure. Pilot survived and died shortly after. And then we have a sketch next from viewer number 5. Then we have viewer number 7. These were all from the final report, and as you can see, not all the viewers were reported. The pilot here said a large curved structure and possibly a lighthouse. Next is a sketch from that particular viewer. It's hard to read the writing. It's a steep downslope-like cliff, talus, water, lots of rocks, hard surfaces. Next. Viewer number 8, again, talked about a large town nearby, high cliffs, lighthouse, and that the pilot escaped the wreckage and died on land. This is an aerial view of the perception of the area. You can notice the blocks there. This was my viewing. The cliffs to the left, the estuary, the lighthouse at the end. These are buildings by the estuary and then fields surrounding a small river that ran down to the estuary. Next. This is where I perceived the pilot to have come inland and walked up through fir trees up to the river, and I actually followed him. This was using IRVA. I followed the pilot and actually stayed with him when he died, which was fairly traumatic. Next. I am not a good artist. I could do with some sketching lessons from Paul. I perceived that the plane came in and to the cliffs and then fell into the water. There was a lighthouse not on the top of the cliffs, but down at the water's level. And this was my drawing of the lighthouse. Over there were lots of buildings at the other side of the estuary, and then the water went round and up in between the cliffs into an estuary and then to a river. Next. Again, this is the lighthouse at the water's level. The plane was down in the water about a quarter of a mile down, and then it drifted with the currents. I tried to draw fleur-de-lis, white arum lily, because I felt this image kept appearing to me. And one of the things in remote viewing is we tend to censor, and I remembered, don't censor, just write it down. And so I put in the white arum lily, and I was trying, if you could bring it down a little bit, I was trying to draw the fleur-de-lis, but I'm not a good artist. Next. Viewer number 9. Again said lighthouse and city or town nearby. And then there was a sketch for viewer number 9. And it says rough sketch, crass wreckage, layout beneath silt. This person felt that the plane was down beneath a lot of silt. Okay. Next, we go to, this is my IRV summary. What I was tasked with was the coordinate at the top. And my summary was sadness, exhaustion after his plane ditched in the sea off a coastal area. He staggered about a quarter of a mile through rough ground near a river. He couldn't see, he lost his glasses, he couldn't breathe, he was utterly exhausted. His clothes were heavy with water, he was wet and cold. I felt his incredible sadness. He fell to his knees and cried, and he fell over near the water. There was a large town nearby, coastal area, near an estuary, woods and water, cold and wet. Next. Then we go to another viewer who used CRV. And as you can notice from this, he noted that the plane flipped over, or something flipped over, stalled, coming down, gliding down, upside down, floating. Give you a few minutes to look at that. This is a classic example of a CRV session. Okay, next. This is some sketching in the same transcript. Curving up, angle across, floating, falling, curving around, down, strong winds. Next. There's a summary here. You notice that the viewer here went into something called 4.5, which I think if you talk with Mel Riley after, he will explain to you. He said flying surrounded by thunderclouds, anvil type, beautiful but frightening, can't go around, can't go under, try to go over, climbing, up, cold rain, up, straining, the engine straining above 14,000 feet, hypoxia, feel lightheaded, giddy, stall, things getting dark, spinning, feel euphoric, everything dark, down, darker and darker, thunderstorm, magnificent, beautiful, so powerful, down like a leaf in the wind, down, dark. And then he took a break. Went back to the target, did an interim summary, getting the impression that individual was flying over a body of water. She ran into severe weather, could not go around or under, tried to go over but never made it. The engine stalled and the pilot suffered from the effects of hypoxia, lost control, never regained it. The aircraft was plummeted around in the storms and finally crashed in the water, like in the English Channel. That's an AOL. Yeah, this was a sketch of the target. You can recognize this from the final report. So we just go through these. Satellite view of the site. This viewer says French coastline, AOL, coastal guns, land. Put in Omaha, a lot of these perhaps were AOLs. And at the top you'll see some humor. There's nothing more frustrating than a spontaneous idiotgram. Next. Had to go up higher, not picking up enough geographical data. And again, land, AOLs of France, water very choppy, and possibility that the plane came down here in the water. Okay. So who is this pilot, Saint-Exupery, that crashed? After I got the feedback that it was Saint-Exupery that crashed the plane, I then went and started looking to see who was this man, and found some interesting things. And I think he would have really felt it was a really neat thing to have us remote viewing him. He was the kind of character. He was a maverick. He was a flyer. He was an explorer. He crashed numerous planes. He was a writer. He was a poet. And he was a mystic. And I think he would have been really, the British have a word called chuffed. And he would have really thought it was neat that we would be remote viewing him. And this is one of his quotes: "It's only with the heart that one can see rightly what is essential is invisible to the eye." This is Antoine Marie Roger de Saint-Exupéry, and he lived between 1900 and 1944. He was 44 when he died, and he was a pilot, poet. He was a mail carrier. He flew planes during World War II, and grew up with a large family. Okay. A little about him here. He, as I say, he crashed numerous planes. He crashed them all over France. Lived in France. And here are some of his writings. And his notable writing is The Little Prince, which I'll show you a cover of the page. Yeah. One of his crashed planes on the bottom, and a statue that was erected in his honor. Next. This is a more formal biography of his, and I like what it says at the bottom, which says that it says Saint-Exupéry's writings celebrate his faith in man and life. His writings are philosophical, even mystical, and his prose is at once poetic and incisive. Very mystical man, and if you read some of his writings, you'll see his mystical and philosophical thoughts coming through. Next. This is the cover from his book, The Little Prince, and as you read it, you will notice a lot of allegorical scenarios that could be applied to remote viewing and the struggles people go through in trying to learn to remote view. Okay, next. In November of 1998, I was sent a copy of Paris Match by a colleague and a student, and they had found the crashed plane in the Bay of Cassis off the coast of France. And I will read you, I don't know how much French that you read, but I will read you a little bit of the translation. The fisherman and the bracelet of the Little Prince. By lifting their fishing nets in the Bay of Cassis, France, Jean-Claude Bianco and his crew found a moving treasure. 54 years after the crash of the plane piloted by Saint-Exupéry, the hope rises again to pierce the mystery of his disappearance. This bracelet will allow to pierce finally the enigma of the disappearance of Saint-Exupéry. Jean-Claude Bianco's boat has brought it back in its fishing nets. The horizon had scraped this day, September 7th, the sea bottom off the calanques of Sormiaux in the Bay of Cassis, France. During the first sorting, a sailor notices a small piece of metal in the mast soldered by sea concretions. He extracts an oxidized bracelet, put through the gratinette, name of a French sponge. The engraved plate delivers first the name Antoine. It is 12:30 p.m. You can go to the next one. At the same hour, 54 years earlier, the radar screen which survives in Corsica the return from the mission of the machines remained desperately empty. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry had disappeared aboard a Lightning P-38. Despite the searches, the wreck, damaged in the sea, had never been found. Authentication given by the authorities with some delay for calls by detour of a sea exploration company, the bracelet allows hope that the wreck located in the Bay of La Ciotat may be that of the mythical plane. And they actually did go on to say that they confirmed this was the plane, of not only from the inscribed bracelet, but from the markings on the plane. This was actually Saint-Exupéry's crash plane, and it's lying there upside down in the silt. This is the Bay of Cassis. If you can look up there on the top left, this is more the Bay de la Ciotat, but it's along that coastline that he actually crashed. And you can see here it says semaphore, my pointer. And semaphore is the French for lighthouse. And I actually have some more information on lighthouses along that coast. So we have the Bay of Cassis. If you can go to the next slide. Here we have Cassis, the town. La Ciotat is an area along the coast there, and this was the main area. It's near Marseille, and we learned that Saint-Exupery was going from Ile Verte, I believe, and traveling by plane, low-level flying to Marseille. So he was traveling north when he crashed. Next slide. Here are the White Cliffs. This is a bay that's very close to Cassis, and these very white cliffs are called the massifs, the huge cliffs, and they're called the calanques. And these are all along the coast from Marseille all the way along the coast, the south coast of France. And they're white sandstone and very, very large, very massive white cliffs. And you may remember that many of the viewers said there were white cliffs along the coast here. Again, another view graph of the massifs and the calanques. This is the town of Cassis, and with the viewing, you can see again some of the fir trees that are abundant in this area. When my viewing was, he came aboard and traveled up through these trees. This is a modern picture of the area, and shows the narrow beach that some of the viewers had depicted, and the houses that are scattered all along the edge of the city. Next. And then again we have an aerial view of Cassis. This was very close to the area that he was found in. Next. So many of the perceptions that the viewers got, which was that there were cliffs, there were white cliffs. He was in fairly shallow water. It wasn't deep water. The plane had drifted with time over the currents, that there was a lighthouse present that wasn't on top of the cliffs, it was down at sea level. There was an estuary. Many of the people spoke about an estuary coming out into the sea, that there was a small town nearby, there were houses, there were fir trees. Many of these perceptions, which were viewed by at least 8 viewers, were concordant. And if you were to do that statistically, I'm sure that would be, fairly significant. No stats have been done on this. This has not been published. And we still have information coming in. In fact, before coming here to talk, I didn't have a picture of the lighthouse to show you. Since then, I went online and I actually have a picture of the lighthouse at Cassis, which does seem to match some of the drawings that we have. Again, let's go back to Saint-Exupéry, a very perceptive man. He was a pilot, a poet, and I'd like to read you some of his quotes. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. As for the future, your task is not to foresee it, but to enable it. A rock pile ceases to be a rock pile the moment a single man contemplates it, bearing within him the image of a cathedral. He says, you've achieved perfection in design, not when you have nothing more to add, but when you have nothing more to take away. Love does not consist in gazing at each other, but in looking outward together in the same direction. It's only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. What makes the desert beautiful is that somewhere it hides a well. And the last one, transportation of the males, transport of the human voice, transport of flickering pictures in this century as in others, our highest accomplishments still have the single aim of bringing men and women together. And I would like to finish there by going back to the first view graph. And I would like to ask how many of you were scared by this dangerous thing? How many of you thought it was a hat? One person. Saint-Exupéry used to give this drawing as a test to adults. He loved children, and he liked to think as a child. This is a picture of a boa constrictor that swallowed an elephant. And he used to give this drawing. If he met a new person, he'd give them this drawing and say, "Tell me what this is." And they would say, "Oh, it's a hat." And he'd say, "What, does it scare you?" "No." And he'd say, "Well, it should. It's a large boa that swallowed an elephant." And if they said the hat, he had nothing more to do with them. If they said it was a snake that had swallowed an elephant or something else creative or imaginative, he made them his friend. And that's where I'd like to finish my talk.